From the Hindu Kush to the Rockies, a journey from Kabul to Colorado in community-led transformation, a memoir of resilience, advocacy, and transformation by Homayun Milad. Between Mountains, My Journey from Kabul to Colorado. Episode 1. Morning arrived in Kabul as it always had, quiet, familiar, carrying the promise of another day. The sun stretched over the city, casting long shadows between narrow streets, warming rooftops where life hummed in its steady rhythm. Families stirred. Children packed their books for school, stuffing them into bags with eager anticipation. The routine unfolded in predictable motions. Yet beneath the surface, an unspoken tension lingered. Whispers carried fear into every gathering place. The markets, alleyways, mosques. For days, rumors had spread. Something was coming. But life pressed forward, unwilling to surrender to uncertainty. Driving through Kabul, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Vendors opened their stalls, their voices ringing out prices with effortless ease. Cars navigated the chaos, honking, pressing forward. A city in motion, surviving, even in the face of the unknown. At a familiar coffee shop, I paused. One last moment of normalcy before the world unraveled. The scent of roasted beans hung in the air, promising fleeting comfort. This ritual had always been the same. Coffee, conversation, the exchange of ideas before the day's demands took hold. A small tradition, a moment of shared community before stepping into responsibility. Then, just as I took a sip of coffee, the call came. Shelter in place immediately. Ensure everyone in the office is accounted for and move to a safe location. Fear had arrived, but the real terror was yet to begin. The drive that should have felt routine carried an unsettling weight. The streets blurred in motion, but something had shifted. A long line stretched outside a bank, faces tight with unease, silent desperation cutting through hurried movements. The city is falling. People are withdrawing their money before it's too late. At the office, only a handful remained. Fear seeped into the walls, wrapping itself around every conversation, every movement. There was no doubt. Everything built over years had to be erased. Destroy everything. Erase any trace of our work. 20 years of effort, documents holding the weight of community engagement, burned into nothing. Not just paper disappeared into the flames, but histories, stories, proof of shared struggles and collective progress. Outside, helicopters hovered above the city. The distant echo of hurried footsteps carried through emptying streets. Then came the hardest call. Home. I hesitated before dialing, my fingers trembling, as if the act itself would make the moment real. When my father answered, his voice was steady, but I could hear the quiet strain beneath it, the weight of everything unspoken. "Baba," I said, my voice uneven. "We need to leave." Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. "Leave?" he finally asked, as though the word itself was foreign, impossible to process. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to say it again, this time with conviction, though inside I felt anything but sure. "We have to go. It's not safe anymore." His breath hitched, the sound barely audible over the static of the call. Then his voice broke, fragile, trembling with everything this decision meant. "You're abandoning everything? What about the children?" I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the wall. There was no answer that could make this easier. No words that could soften the truth. Everything we had built, every memory, every hard-fought moment of progress, it was slipping away, and all I could do was watch. And yet, I knew. We had no choice. Hours blurred together, preparations unfolding in frantic motions. Streets once filled with life now stood eerily quiet as gunfire cracked in the distance. Uncertainty settled like fog over the city, pressing against every breath. Between August 15th, the day Kabul fell, and August 26th, the day I left, survival became a game of movement, constant, calculated, necessary. For 10 days, I lived in the shadows of my own city, slipping through alleys that once felt familiar, now distorted by fear. The streets, once chaotic with vendors and children, were eerily silent. Only the sound of hurried footsteps remained, the quiet rush of those like me, trying to disappear before they were found. I learned to read the city differently. A wrong turn could mean exposure. A hesitation could cost everything. The people who once nodded in recognition now avoided eye contact, their faces drawn tight with uncertainty, afraid that even an exchange of glances might tether them to danger. Every night, I counted the hours, measured my breathing, listened. The hum of helicopters overhead was relentless, cutting through the silence like a warning. Somewhere, gunfire crackled, a grim reminder that the walls around me weren't strong enough to keep history from closing in. Food was scarce, but fear was plentiful. Messages came in hushed tones, warnings passed between friends who had already vanished. Stay inside. Don't answer unknown numbers. Burn anything that connects you to your past. I was erasing myself in real time, deleting documents, shredding papers, abandoning pieces of the life I had built. Every step toward leaving meant cutting away something precious, yet I had no time to grieve those losses. Survival demanded urgency, not sentiment. The final hours felt unreal. Packing was frantic. Every item weighed against its risk. Do I bring my notes? The ones filled with plans, stories, dreams? Or do I leave them behind? Let them be swallowed by the city, lost like so much else. The drive to the airport felt both like an escape and a betrayal. Kabul blurred past me, its streets lined with desperation. Families clung to each other, pleading with unseen forces for mercy. The city I had loved, the one I had fought for, was now just a backdrop to my leaving. At the gates, the weight of everything hit me. The people pressed against barricades, hands reaching, voices breaking, begging for a way out. I could do nothing. I was just another person trying to flee, trying to outrun history before it swallowed me whole. Then, suddenly, I was beyond the walls, beyond the city, beyond the life that had shaped me. The world had shifted beneath my feet. I was safe, but safety had never felt so much like loss. August 26th, the day of departure leaving, was not just an act. It was a severance. It was the unraveling of everything I had built, the slow collapse of a life carefully stitched together over decades. It was more than leaving behind a city. It was abandoning a history, a home, a future I had once fought to shape. At the airport gates, the weight of departure was suffocating. 18 hours of waiting. 18 hours of bodies pressed together. Thousands carrying the same desperation, the same fear, the same hope. The air was thick with exhaustion, sweat, and uncertainty. No food, no restrooms, just survival. Gunfire cracked through the air, sharp, erratic, too close. Tear gas burned through the chaos, stinging eyes already brimming with fear. Soldiers shouted orders, their voices drowned out by the cries of families pleading for escape. Parents clutched their children, shielding them from a reality too cruel to explain. Then, Alfredo Gate opened, a brief, fragile passage to survival. A narrow window, a chance, one that would have slammed shut just hours later when Abbey Gate was bombed, claiming innocent lives. Stepping through that gate felt like betrayal, like turning my back on the voices still trapped outside, on the city that had raised me, on the people who would never get the chance to leave. Boarding the C-17 was another test of endurance, a military cargo plane, not meant for passengers, but for supplies. Yet here we were, 470 evacuees crammed onto the cold metal floor, bodies pressed together in the suffocating heat of displacement. There was no space to stretch, no room to breathe, just silence, broken only by quiet prayers and muffled sobs. The struggle of the displaced. When the plane touched down in Kuwait, the cabin felt like an oven. The air inside was stale, thick with exhaustion. The doors opened, and heat swallowed us whole, dry, relentless, pressing against our skin. We were herded onto buses, rushed through the next step of survival. Soldiers handed out bottles of cold water and emergency meals. A momentary relief, but not an answer. No one knew what was coming next. 7 hours of waiting. 7 hours of uncertainty. Then another bus ride, blasting hot air against faces already raw from fatigue, leading us back to the airfield at 3 a.m. Another plane. Another C-17, even more crowded than before. 570 evacuees packed inside, pressed against each other, bound by a shared fate. A community in transit landing in Rota, Spain, offered the first glimpse of kindness in days. Service members and volunteers handing out breakfast, toys to restless children, soft words of comfort. We'll continue this story in the next episode, so stay tuned.